The Divine Empire. The crystal fortress floated in the void between stars, a monument to 10,000 years of absolute power. Its surfaces caught starlight and twisted it into impossible colors that hurt mortal eyes. From within its halls, the Eternal Ones ruled half the galaxy with thoughts alone. Lord Cain stood before the viewing wall, his golden form radiating light that wasn't quite natural. His eyes, ancient beyond measure, watched 100 worlds spin in holographic display. Each world sent its tribute on schedule. Each species bowed when their masters appeared in the sky. All was as it had been for millennia. My lord spoke a lesser eternal, her voice like singing crystal. The Vex have completed their offering. 3,000 of their younglings, as commanded. Cain nodded without turning. Send them to the conversion chambers. Their essence will fuel our next expansion. This was the order of things. The Eternal Ones commanded, the galaxy obeyed. Those who refused simply ceased to exist. Their technology appeared as magic to lesser beings. Ships that moved without engines, weapons that erased matter from reality, bodies that could not die. They were gods in all but origin, though none now lived who remembered they had ever been anything else. Far from the crystal fortress, in the outer spiral of the galaxy, the human warship Thunder picked up a distress signal. The bridge hummed with activity as Captain James studied the data streaming across his command screen. Signals coming from the Tari colony, reported Lieutenant Anna from her station. But sir, the colony... It's gone, James frowned. Gone? The planet's still there, but where the colony should be, there's just glass, 20 kilometers of melted glass. The captain stood, his weathered face hardening. The Tari were peaceful traders, allies of Earth for 50 years. Any survivors? Negative, sir. But I'm picking up residual energy signatures. They're unusual. Engineer Tom pulled up the analysis on the main screen. Captain, these readings match reports from the inner systems. The same signatures appear when the Eternal Ones strike. A heavy silence fell over the bridge. Everyone knew about the Eternal Ones, the self-proclaimed gods who ruled the core worlds with absolute power. Humanity had avoided them so far, expanding carefully along the outer rim, but the stories that reached Earth spoke of beings with impossible powers. Sir, Anna said quietly, I've found a recording from the colony's final moments. James nodded. Play it. The view screen flickered to life. A Tari administrator appeared, his blue-scaled face twisted in desperation. To anyone who receives this, they came for our children. The Eternal Ones demanded them for something called essence harvesting. We refused. We tried to explain that our younglings would die without their birth pools. They said our defiance was unacceptable. The image shook violently. In the background, a golden light grew brighter. They're destroying everything. Please, someone must know. The gods can be defied. We stood against them. We said no. Remember that we... The recording ended in static. Captain James stood still for a long moment. Around him, his crew waited. They were military, trained for combat, but challenging beings who could destroy planets with a thought seemed like madness. Tom, James said finally, pull everything we have on the Eternal Ones. Every report, every rumor, every piece of data, sir. Tom looked uncertain. Are we really going to... We're going to investigate. The Tari were our allies. We owe them that much. Over the next hours, the crew studied thousands of files. James noticed something others had missed, patterns in the Eternal Ones' attacks. Their divine wrath always followed predictable energy curves. Their instant movement left quantum traces. Their immortal bodies still needed ships to travel between systems. They're not gods, James said to his senior officers. They're just very old, very advanced, and very arrogant. They've been unchallenged so long they've started believing their own propaganda. Captain, Anna interrupted, we're approaching the Forbidden Zone, the border of Eternal One space. James returned to his chair. Take us in. Quarter speed, shields at maximum. The Thunder moved forward into space no human ship had entered before. Ahead, the crystal fortress waited, home to beings who had forgotten they were ever mortal. They would soon remember. First contact with divinity. The Thunder had barely crossed into forbidden space when reality itself seemed to shiver. The bridge lights flickered and every screen displayed the same message in burning golden text. Kneel. Captain James gripped his armrests. Steady, everyone. Anna, full sensor sweep. Sir, I'm reading massive energy buildups from everywhere. It's like space itself is watching us. The air above the bridge command platform shimmered, and Lord Kane materialized not in person, but as a projection of pure light. He stood 3 meters tall, his form shifting between solid and ethereal, eyes burning with the intensity of stars. Mortals. Kane's voice resonated through the ship's hull, bypassing their communication systems entirely. You trespass upon the realm of eternity. You will kneel, or you will become nothing. James stood slowly, meeting those ancient eyes without flinching. I am Captain James of the Earthship Thunder. We're investigating the destruction of a peaceful colony, under galactic law. Kane laughed, a sound like breaking galaxies. Law, I am the law. I am the word that shapes reality. Observe. The main view screen switched to an external view. In the distance, a small moon orbited a gas giant. Kane raised one translucent hand, fingers spreading wide. The moon cracked like an egg, then exploded into atoms, its destruction complete in seconds. The bridge crew gasped. Several younger officers stepped back from their stations. That moon was uninhabited, Kane said, his tone casual. The next demonstration will not be, kneel, humans. Join the billion races who serve. Or join the Tari in oblivion. James felt fear crawl up his spine, but he'd learned long ago not to let fear make his choices. That's an impressive light show. But we don't kneel, not to anyone. Kane's expression shifted. Surprise? It had been millennia since anyone had refused after such a display. Tom, James said quietly. What did the sensors pick up? The engineer's fingers flew across his console. Captain, the moon destruction. It wasn't instant. There was a buildup, a focused quantum stream. It actually took 3 seconds, just compressed visually to seem instantaneous. You dare analyze divine power? Kane's form blazed brighter. We analyze everything, James replied. It's what humans do. We take things apart to understand them. Even gods. Kane's projection vanished. Immediately the thunder shook as golden energy beams struck from 3 directions. The ship's lights went red, alarms screaming. Shields at 60%, Anna shouted. How are they hitting us so hard? Wait, Tom called out, studying his readings. The beams are single frequency. They're putting all power into one wavelength pattern. James understood immediately. Rotate shield frequencies. Random modulation, full spectrum. Anna's hands danced over her controls. The next barrage hit, but this time the shields held, scattering the golden light into harmless sparkles. Shields holding at 90%, Anna reported, amazement in her voice. On 3 massive ships approaching them, herald vessels, each one supposedly invincible, confusion reigned. These were the same weapons that had shattered civilizations. No shield had ever withstood them for more than seconds. Lord Kane's voice echoed through the ship again, but now it carried an edge of uncertainty. Your tricks will not save you. We have weapons beyond your comprehension. Maybe, James said, settling back into his command chair. But so far, all I've seen is old technology dressed up with fancy lights. Very old technology that hasn't needed to adapt because everyone's been too scared to fight back. The herald ships moved closer, their hulls gleaming with that impossible light. But Tom was pulling apart their sensor readings, finding patterns in the chaos. Captain, their propulsion, it's quantum tunneling, but the entry points follow mathematical constants. If we can predict where they'll appear, do it. Anna, prepare firing solutions based on Tom's calculations. Lieutenant Anna looked up from her station. Sir, I'm intercepting communications between their ships. They're arguing. They don't understand why we're not dead. James allowed himself a small smile. They've been gods so long they've forgotten that gods can be surprised. And if they can be surprised, they can be beaten. The herald ships began to shift positions, preparing for another attack. But now the Thunder's computers were learning, adapting, doing what humans did best, finding patterns in chaos and exploiting them. All stations, James announced. Prepare for combat, real combat. Let's show these gods what war looks like when their opponents fight back. The golden ships descended, divine wrath made manifest. But the humans were ready. The age of unopposed godhood was about to end. The weakness of gods, the herald fleet materialized from quantum space in perfect formation. 20 ships that had never known defeat, each one a masterpiece of eternal engineering. Their hulls sang with power, golden light streaming between them like a web of divine authority. Captain James watched them emerge. Tom, you tracking their tunnel points? Got them, Captain. They're using the same mathematical progression like they're following a textbook written 10,000 years ago. Because they are, James realized. When you never lose, you never need to change tactics. Anna, implement attack pattern Sierra 7. The thunder suddenly burst into motion, not toward the Herald fleet but away at an oblique angle. The Herald ships hesitated. Prey never ran like this with purpose rather than panic. Launching decoy drones, Anna reported. 20 small objects shot from the thunder, each one broadcasting false sensor signatures. The lead Herald ship, commanded by an Eternal named Marcus who had lived for 8 millennia, fired at what his instrument said was the human vessel. The golden beam vaporized 3 drones while the real thunder circled behind, pulse cannons charging. Fire, James ordered. Blue-white energy slammed into the Herald ship's engines. Shields that had never been seriously tested flickered and failed in seconds. The impossible happened. A Herald ship listed to one side, wounded. Marcus's shock rippled through the quantum communication network. Impossible. We are eternal. We are... His words cut off as the thunder fired again, targeting the exact quantum frequencies Tom had identified. The Herald ship didn't explode, it simply stopped, all power dead, floating helpless in the void. 1 down, James said grimly. 19 to go. The remaining Herald ships broke formation, something they'd never done in 10,000 years of combat. They scattered, trying to surround the human vessel. But scatter tactics only work when your enemy can't predict where you'll be. They're using quantum tunnel pattern Beta 9, Tom called out. Anna, sector 7 through 15. The thunder fired before the Herald ships finished materializing. 3 more vessels emerged from quantum space directly into pulse cannon fire. Their shields, configured for old warfare, shattered like glass. In the Crystal Fortress, Lord Cain watched the impossible unfold. His perfect Herald fleet, the Fist of God made manifest, was being taken apart by a single human ship. Prepare my personal transport, he commanded. I will deal with these insects myself. Back at the battle, Engineer Tom made a discovery that changed everything. Captain, I'm detecting massive data streams between all Eternal ships in the fortress. They're not just communicating, they're linked. Linked how? Quantum consciousness transfer, sir. It's how they maintain immortality. When one body dies, their consciousness jumps to another prepared vessel. But the network has a central node. James understood immediately. They're not immortal. They're just backed up. Find that node, Tom. While Tom worked, the Herald fleet regrouped. They'd learned, slowly, to vary their patterns. But learning after 10 millennia of stagnation was like trying to run after a lifetime of sitting still. The thunder employed human military doctrine. Feints within feints. False retreats that became ambushes, sacrificing minor systems to protect critical ones. When the Heralds adapted to one tactic, the humans had already moved to another. Got it, Tom shouted. The central node is in the fortress's power core. If we can disrupt it, they become mortal, James finished. Anna launched stealth drones. Maximum dispersion pattern. 50 tiny drones, each no bigger than a human fist, scattered into space. They were painted black, emitting no energy. Invisible against the void. The Herald ships focused on the thunder never noticed them. That's when Lord Cain arrived. His ship was unlike the others, a blade of pure golden energy that bent space around it. It appeared directly in front of the thunder, no quantum tunnel needed. Enough. Cain's voice shook the ship. I will end this personally. The blade ship's attack was unlike anything before. Not beams or projectiles, but waves of reality distortion that made the thunder's hull groan and buckle. Shields failing, Anna reported. He's using something new. No, Tom corrected, reading his instruments. Something very old. This is their original technology before they forgot how to use it. He's actually fighting us, James stood. Then we fight back. All weapons concentrate fire on... Cain materialized on the bridge. Not a projection. The Eternal Lord himself, golden form blazing with fury. His hand swept out and 3 bridge officers flew backward, unconscious. You dare defy divinity? Cain approached James, each step leaving burning footprints in the deck plating. James pulled his sidearm and fired. The plasma bolt struck Cain in the chest. And for the first time in 8,000 years, an Eternal One felt pain. The fall of heaven Cain stared at the smoking wound in his chest. Golden blood, if it could be called blood, seeping through his fingers. This is not possible. I am eternal. I am divine. You're bleeding, James said, keeping his weapon trained on the eternal Lord. Gods don't bleed. Kane's perfect face twisted with an emotion he hadn't felt in millennia. Fear. But beneath the fear, something else stirred. Memory. We were like you once, Kane said, his voice losing its thunderous authority. Mortal, fragile, afraid of death. He laughed bitterly. We conquered death itself. We became more than flesh, more than temporary existence. We became forever. Around them, the bridge crew slowly recovered, watching this impossible scene, their captain holding a god at gunpoint. Tom, James said without looking away from Kane, status on those drones? 15 minutes from the fortress, Captain. But their defense grid will be looking at us, James finished. He stepped closer to Kane. You forgot something when you became gods. You forgot that mortality made you strong. The fear of death made you creative, adaptive. Now you're just stagnant. Kane's wound was already healing, golden light knitting the flesh back together. You understand nothing. We have lived 10,000 years. We have seen civilizations rise and fall. But you haven't lived, Anna said from her station. You've just existed, unchanged, unchallenged. Kane raised his hand to strike her down, but James fired again. This time Kane moved, not with godlike speed, but with the desperate dodge of someone remembering mortality. Captain, Tom called urgently. I'm deep into their network. The quantum consciousness system, it's incredible. But sir, there are millions of minds trapped in here. Trapped, every servant race that ever surrendered to them. Their consciousness were harvested and stored, used as processing power for the eternal network. They're slaves even in death. Kane's eyes widened. He'd forgotten this truth, buried it beneath millennia of self-deification. They serve their purpose. They support paradise eternal. They're prisoners, James corrected, and we're going to free them. The battle outside intensified. The Herald fleet, reinforced by more ships from the fortress, pressed their attack. But something had changed. They fought desperately now, not with the casual certainty of gods, but with the frantic energy of those who suddenly realized they could lose. James made a decision. Lord Kane, I challenge you. Single combat. If you win, we withdraw. If I win, you tell us how to free those minds. Kane stood slowly, his full height towering over the human captain. You would dare duel a god? I'm dueling a very old man who's forgotten how to fight. Kane's roar shook the ship. The two beings circled each other on the bridge. Kane moved with grace, 10,000 years of existence flowing through each gesture. But James moved with purpose, every action calculated for survival. When they clashed, it was ancient power against human determination. Kane's fists could shatter steel, but James had trained in gravity worlds. Kane could predict movements with quantum certainty, but James fought with chaotic creativity. While they fought, Tom's fingers flew across his console. Anna, I need you to modulate our communications array. If I can inject this code into their network, what will it do? Give those trapped minds a choice, freedom or servitude. Anna began the modifications while the duel continued. Kane landed a blow that sent James flying, but the captain rolled with it, coming up with a maintenance tool in his hand. A simple plasma cutter that sliced across Kane's leg. The Eternal Lord stumbled. When was the last time he'd felt off balance? Captain, Tom shouted. The drones are in position. But if we detonate them, the fortress falls. Kane gasped, understanding flooding his ancient eyes. Our immortality network collapses. We become mortal. James stood, ribs cracked but unbroken. That's the choice. Live as mortals or die as false gods. The bridge view screen lit up with images from the fortress. The stealth drones had attached themselves to critical systems. Antimatter charges armed and ready. Kane felt the fear again, stronger now. Death. Real death. No backup, no consciousness transfer, no eternal return. We built paradise, he whispered. We ended death itself. You built a prison, James replied. And made yourselves the wardens and the inmates. Tom's virus spread through the quantum network. Suddenly, millions of consciousness became aware. The Vex, the Tari, hundreds of species who'd been harvested over millennia. They began to resist. In the fortress, systems started failing. The carefully maintained network that sustained eternal immortality began fragmenting as millions of minds fought for freedom. Kane felt it, his connection to eternity wavering, flickering like a candle in a storm. "Choose," James said. "Mortality or oblivion." Mortals and gods, the crystal fortress shuddered. 10,000 years of perfect stability ended as millions of enslaved minds tore at their digital chains. Through the viewing ports, the Herald fleet could see sections of the fortress going dark, its impossible geometries collapsing into ordinary matter. Kane fell to his knees on the Thunder's bridge, hands clutching his head. The voices. They're all screaming. Every mind we harvested, every consciousness we stored. They want out. They want revenge. They want freedom, James corrected, limping to his command chair. Tom's status? The network's cascading failure, Captain. The immortality backup system has maybe 10 minutes before complete collapse. Through the chaos, other Eternal Ones began appearing on the bridge, not physically, but as desperate projections. Lady Vera, who had ruled 17 systems, Marcus, wounded from the earlier battle, dozens of beings who hadn't felt fear since before human civilization began. Lord Kane. Vera's projection flickered with panic. "The fortress is falling. Our eternal forms are failing. Make them stop." Kane looked up at James with eyes that suddenly seemed very old and very tired. "You've won. The humans have won. But do you understand what you've done? We kept order. We prevented wars between species. You prevented growth," Anna interrupted from her station. "The Tari, the Vex, hundreds of species. They never got to reach their potential because you needed them to worship you." The deck shook as another section of the fortress exploded. On the view screen, escape pods began launching, not the golden vessels of gods, but simple metal craft carrying terrified beings who were remembering what it meant to be mortal. "Captain," Tom reported, "I'm reading massive data streams. The enslaved consciousness are downloading themselves into any available hardware, robots, computers, even navigation systems. They're free, but they need physical forms." James made a command decision. "Broadcast to all vessels. Any species seeking asylum from the fortress will be given safe passage. Any Eternal who surrenders will be treated as prisoners of war, not gods." Kane laughed bitterly. "Prisoners. We ruled the galaxy. You enslaved it," James said. "There's a difference. Some Eternal Ones chose death. They stood in their fortress chambers as the structures collapsed, unwilling to face existence without their godhood. Their consciousness, with nowhere to transfer, simply ended. 10,000-year-old flames finally extinguished. But others, like Kane, chose differently. "I accept," Kane said quietly. "I choose mortality. I choose to remember what we were before we forgot ourselves." The antimatter charges detonated. The crystal fortress didn't explode, it dissolved. The quantum structures that held it together unraveled, and the impossible architecture became simple matter again. The central node that maintained the immortality network vaporized in a flash that could be seen 3 systems away. Across the galaxy, on 100 worlds, beings who had knelt in worship watched their gods fall from the sky, not in death but in mortality. The Eternal Ones who survived found themselves in normal bodies, feeling hunger, exhaustion, and pain for the first time in millennia. "Sir," Anna reported, "we're receiving transmissions from everywhere. The Vex are organizing rescue operations for consciousness trapped in damaged systems. The Tari survivors are offering medical aid to wounded Eternals. Species that were enemies under Eternal rule are working together." On the bridge, Kane's golden form flickered and faded. Beneath it stood a man, tall, aged, with silver hair and eyes that carried the weight of 10,000 years. He looked at his hands, flesh and blood trembling slightly. "I had forgotten," he whispered. "The feeling of a heartbeat. The need to breathe. You'll remember more," James said, finally lowering his weapon. "Hunger, satisfaction, fear, joy, all the things that make life actually worth living." 6 months later, the galaxy looked very different. The liberated species formed a council, working together without the forced unity of divine rule. Some former Eternals adapted to mortality, becoming teachers and historians, sharing their vast knowledge while learning humility. Others couldn't accept the change and isolated themselves, mourning their lost godhood. Captain James stood on the observation deck of the Thunder, now docked at the new United Species station built from the fortress's remains. Kane stood beside him, dressed in simple clothes, looking older each day but somehow more alive. "Do you regret it?" Kane asked. "Destroying paradise?" James watched ships from a dozen species working together, building something new. "It wasn't paradise. Paradise isn't given by gods. It's built by mortals working together, failing and trying again. We feared death so much we forgot to live, Cain admitted. You humans, you embrace mortality. You know you'll die, and yet you fight, you love, you create. How? Because we know we'll die, James replied. Every moment matters when you don't have eternity. A young Vex approached them, one of the millions freed from the network. Captain James, the council is ready for your report. James nodded and turned to leave, then paused. Coming, Cain? The former god, now just a man, smiled. It was perhaps his first genuine smile in 10,000 years. Yes, I have much to learn about being mortal. As they walked toward the council chambers, neither noticed the small human child playing with a young eternal one, both laughing as they chased each other through the station corridors. The children didn't care about gods or mortals, empire or freedom. They were just alive, and that was enough. The galaxy had been ruled by gods who forgot they were mortal. It took a single human warship to remind them, not through superior firepower or technology, but through something simpler and more powerful, the courage to stand up and say no. The Eternal Ones had called themselves gods. Humanity called their bluff. And in the end, the greatest discovery wasn't how to destroy immortals. It was how to teach them to be human again. They came proclaiming divinity, demanding worship, wielding the power of ages. But they forgot the most important truth. Gods who can bleed are just mortals in denial. And humans? We've been calling out false gods since we first looked at the stars and decided to reach them ourselves. From the personal log of Captain James, USS Thunder, the end.